Welcome to HFY Beyond Terra, where humanity doesn't just survive, it becomes the galaxy's biggest surprise. Subscribe, and let's go beyond Terra.
The first time I saw her, I forgot how to breathe. That's not a metaphor. My lungs literally stalled like an old engine, and the security officer beside me made a concerned noise that sounded like a radio squawk. "Human?" he asked. I lifted one hand in a vague gesture that meant I'm alive, just temporarily uninstalling my operating system. We were in the Imperial Audience Hall of Carvelan architecture, flex built by a species that considered gravity a suggestion and symmetry a religion. The ceiling was so high it faded into dusk. Light rippled down the columns in slow waves, as if the building itself was thinking. And at the far end of it all, upon a throne that looked like it had grown from stone and starlight, sat the Queen. Alien queens in human movies are usually either armored, nightmares, or ethereal supermodels with glitter for blood. Reality, as always, chose an option nobody had budgeted for. She wasn't delicate. She was crafted. Tall, broad-shouldered, with skin like polished midnight and faint iridescence that shifted whenever she moved greens, violets, and the kind of gold you only see when you stare at a storm cloud and it decides to forgive you. Her crown wasn't metal but living crystal that climbed like ivy around her horns. Her eyes, too, thank every benevolent force in the universe, were a deep ember red that made you feel like you were being seen from the inside. She watched us approach. The entourage around me, diplomats, translators, guards, had rehearsed for months. We had scripts. We had contingency plans for 17 different ways of being insulted. We had cultural cheat sheets that told us not to smile too widely, not to point, and under no circumstances mention the Carvel concept of ancestral scent. I was there for one reason. I was the human in the room who could talk to machines. The Carvel didn't trust artificial intelligence. They believed thinking constructs were a doorway to old horrors, the kind that devour history and spit out silence. So their ships ran on a patchwork of biocircuitry and stubborn tradition. But they'd hit a wall. A new region of space was interfering with their navigation, their comms, their shields. Their engines sang wrong notes. Their entire fleet was limping. They needed help. They needed someone who wasn't afraid of doorways. They needed Earth's weird little talent. Humans made friends with monsters. They also needed someone expendable. That part wasn't written on my credentials, but it hung in the air like a bad smell. My name is Jonah Reeve. I'm a systems engineer from the Jovian shipyards, and I had been awake for 47 hours when the chamber doors opened and the Queen's gaze landed on me like a physical force. I didn't bow low enough. I didn't say the opening line. I didn't even remember the opening line. All I did was stand there, blinking like a malfunctioning sensor, and think, oh no. Because she tilted her head and the light caught on the edge of her horns. Then something in her expression softened, not weakness, not amusement exactly, but the faintest spark of curiosity. She leaned forward, one clawed hand resting lightly on the throne's arm, and the entire room seemed to lean with her. Even the air. The prime diplomat cleared his throat. "Your Radiance. We present the envoy from Terra." Her voice cut through him like a blade through silk. "The human." Her translator node, a small, floating prism near her throat, rendered her words with a respectful hum. She didn't look at the diplomat again. She only looked at me. I felt my mouth open to say something normal, like it's an honor. Or thank you for having me. Or even please don't eat me. I'm high in stress hormones. What came out instead was, "You're so attractive I can't even speak." Silence detonated. Somewhere behind me, a Carvel guard made a choking sound. The translator, faithful and cruel, repeated it in perfect imperial cadence. My brain screamed, "Why did you say that?" My soul tried to leave my body out of embarrassment but got caught on my rib cage. I could already see the diplomatic incident report. Human envoy insults queen with strange courtship threat. Possible challenge. I swallowed and tried to add anything to rescue myself. I mean, Your Radiance, I'm on my communication is, words scattered like frightened birds. The queen blinked once. Then, impossibly, color rose beneath her midnight skin. A deep violet flush bloomed along the ridges of her cheekbones and crept toward the base of her horns, like sunrise trying to be discreet. Her eyes widened a fraction. The guard nearest the throne straightened in alarm, as if the queen had been struck. The entire court exhaled in one confused wave, and the Queen Carvel, devourer of traitors, commander of the outer shield, let out the smallest, most startled sound I had ever heard from anyone who could legally order a planet to kneel. It was almost a laugh. Almost. She sat back, recomposed herself with regal violence, and said, "Human Jonah Reeve." I froze. She knew my name. "I did not summon you for noise," she paused. Her translator hummed politely around the implied meaning, idiocy. But there was a flicker in her eyes that didn't match the stern line of her mouth. "And yet," she added, voice lower, "you have spoken." The prime diplomat, still pale, tried to recover. "Your Radiance, the human is." "Mine," the queen said simply. Every head snapped toward her. The word fell like a weight. "Not mine as in property." "Not exactly. More like a claim in a game whose rules I didn't know." The translator trembled for a second before it chose the closest human approximation. "Under my protection. Under my authority. Under my interest." The diplomats behind me made small, terrified sounds. I just stood there thinking, this is it. This is how I die. I die because I flirted with a monarch by accident. The queen rose from her throne. The sound of its stone shifting, biometal flexing, echoed through the hall. She stepped down one level, then another, until she stood on the polished black floor and the distance between us suddenly felt too small for safety. She was taller than I expected. Her presence didn't just fill space. It occupied it, like gravity had decided to take a humanoid form and learn sarcasm. She stopped in front of me. I could see the fine patterns in her skin up close, faint lines like constellations mapped under the surface. I could also see that her flush hadn't faded. If anything, it had deepened. She studied me for a long moment. Then she said, so softly the translator hesitated, "You cannot even speak." I swallowed. "I can, usually." Her mouth curved barely. A ghost of a smile that made my stomach forget its job. "Good," she said. "Then you will speak to my fleet." And like that, the moment was over. Court snapped back into motion. Guards relaxed. Diplomat lungs remembered oxygen. But as she turned away, her gaze lingered on me for one breath longer than it needed to, as if she hadn't decided yet whether I was a problem to solve or a puzzle to keep. They'd brought me to the flagship that night, not escorted. Escorted is what you do with important guests. This was containment dressed as courtesy. The flagship, Vigil of the First Crown, hung in orbit like a blade. Its hull was etched with runes that shifted as you watched, as if the ship was remembering how to be seen. Inside, everything was alive in subtle ways. The walls warmed when I passed. Light followed like a tent of insects. Doors opened like eyelids. A Carvel technician shorter than the Queen thankfully guided me down a corridor lined with ceremonial banners. "Do not speak of what occurred," he told me, voice tight. "What? The part where I committed social suicide?" He glanced at me, horrified. "The Queen's." "Color." "Oh," I said, suddenly understanding. That's not supposed to happen in public, is it? His throat frills fluttered. It is. Not in the records. Great, I murmured. So I'm a historical event. He didn't laugh. Carvel rarely did in front of humans. They treated us like the universe's most unpredictable chemical reaction. He led me into the ship's core chamber. If the audience hall had been a cathedral, the core was a living heart. Biocables as thick as my torso pulsed along the walls. A spherical engine node hovered in the center, wrapped in a lattice of crystal nerves. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something like crushed leaves. The navigation array, what they'd called the star sense, flickered. It was wrong. I could feel it the way you feel a song played in the wrong key. I stepped closer, hands itching for a console that wasn't there. Where's your interface? The technician pointed to a cluster of embedded runes. Touch, listen, answer. That's poetic. That is functional. I placed my palm against the rune cluster. A shock ran up my arm, not painful, but startling, like the ship had just taken my hand and decided to check my pulse. Images flooded my mind. Not pictures exactly, more like sensations translated into thought. Star fields bending. Currents in space. A dark region ahead like a bruise on reality. I jerked back, heart pounding. Okay, that's new. The technician's eyes narrowed. You felt it. Yeah, I said, swallowing. And it feels like you're flying towards something that doesn't want you to exist. He tilted his head. That is why you are here. Before I could respond, the chamber doors opened again and the air changed. She entered. The queen didn't wear armor tonight. She wore something closer to a robe, layers of dark fabric that moved like smoke, bound by a belt of woven metal. Her crown crystal shimmered faintly, dimmer than in court, as if she'd turned down her own light. Her guards stayed outside. She came alone. The technician bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the floor. Your radiance. She nodded once and looked at me. Human Jonah Reeve. I tried very hard to say something normal this time. Your. Radiance. Her eyes flicked to my face, then my hands, then the rune cluster. You touched the star sense. It touched me back, I said. A breath of amusement moved through her. It does not accept all. That's comforting, I muttered. She stepped closer to the engine node, watching the flicker. Our fleet cannot pass the Black Veil? Black Veil? I echoed. The region that steals our sight. Her voice hardened. It has devoured 3 scouts. Their last transmissions were incoherent. Incoherent how? I asked, trying to sound professional instead of like a man talking to a cosmic horror in a fancy hallway. The queen lifted her hand. A small projection bloomed in the air symbols, sound wave patterns, fragments of translated speech. One scout's final words, rendered by the ship's translator, stuttered across the display. The stars are wrong. The path is a mouth. I stared. That's not great. Her eyes stayed on mine. The council says we should turn back. There are worlds behind us that rely on our shield. There are enemies ahead who will not wait. So you need a way through, I said. I need a mind that does not fear doorways. I hesitated. Your people think AI is a doorway. Her gaze sharpened. Is it? Sometimes, I admitted. But humans learn something early. Doorways are only dangerous if you walk through blind. She studied me in silence. Then she said, You will solve this. It wasn't a request. I nodded because my survival instincts weren't completely broken. I'll try. Her mouth tightened. Try is what the weak say when they wish to fail politely. Then I will solve it, I corrected. Her eyes warmed, just a fraction. Better. She turned to leave, then paused as if remembering something. She looked back over her shoulder. In court? You spoke, Noise. I felt my ears burn. Yes, her flush returned, faint but undeniable. Why? I could have lied. I could have blamed fatigue, translation lag, human idioms. Instead, because the universe has a sense of humor and because her eyes were too honest for a lie to survive in them, I said the truth. Because you surprised me, I said quietly. I expected a monarch. I didn't expect you. The Queen's throat prism hummed, translating the careful meaning behind my words. Her posture stiffened for a heartbeat, as if she'd been struck again, but not by insult. Then she said, very softly, "You will be careful with your speech, human." "I'll do my best," I said. Her gaze lingered. "Do," and she left. The doors closed behind her with a finality that felt like a promise. I worked. For 2 days, I lived in the core chamber. They fed me nutrient paste that tasted like warm regret. They allowed me sleep in short bursts. The ship watched me the way a cat watches a mouse, curious, patient, ready. I learned their systems the hard way, by touch, by sensation, by listening to the engine's pulse through my bones. I wrote down patterns on a pad they'd given me, because paper, at least, didn't send feelings into your nervous system. The black veil wasn't just interference. It was organized. Something was folding space in a way that made normal navigation impossible. The star sense tried to interpret it and failed because its model of reality didn't include the concept of space that eats instructions. So I did what humans always did when confronted with an impossible environment. I built a bridge out of stubbornness. I asked for access to their biocircuit resonance maps. The technicians protested. I asked anyway. I found a way to overlay their sensory data with a human predictive algorithm, nothing self-aware, nothing that would trigger their fear of thinking constructs. Just pattern recognition. Dumb math with attitude. The ship hated it at first. The star sense flickered wildly whenever my algorithm ran, like it was being asked to sing alongside a stranger. Then, slowly, it adapted. The flicker stabilized. For the first time, the projection of the veil became a shape with edges. It wasn't a bruise. It was a net. A vast, semi-sentient lattice in space, tuned to disrupt anything that used certain frequency harmonics. Carville ships used those harmonics because their biocircuitry resonated in that band. They were ringing the dinner bell. I sat back exhausted and laughed once sharp and humorless. Of course, the Queen returned on the 3rd day. I hadn't showered. My hair looked like it had been in a fist fight with static. My shirt smelled like engine sweat and fear. She stepped into the core chamber, took one look at my state, and unexpectedly her expression softened. "Human Jonah Reeve," she said. "You are diminished." "Working on it," I said, rubbing my eyes. "In both senses." Her gaze flicked to the stabilized display. "You have seen the veil." "I've seen enough," I replied. "It's not random. It's tuned. Something out there built a trap. Your ships are resonating at exactly the wrong frequencies." Her posture sharpened. "An enemy." "Or a predator," I said. "Could be the same thing, but it's waiting for you specifically." She stepped closer. "Can you change our resonance?" "Not easily," I admitted. "Your ships are basically living instruments, but we can cheat." I brought up my notes, tapping them with a shaking finger. "If we layer a counter-harmonic over your biocircuitry, we can shift your signature without ripping out your entire system. It'll be like humming a different note while you sing." Her eyes narrowed. "Will it harm the ship?" "It'll stress it," I said honestly. "But it'll survive. Better than being eaten?" A pause. Then she said, "Do it." I blinked. "Just like that? No council debate? No ceremonial hesitation?" "The council debates," she said. "I command." There it was again, that gravity in human form. I swallowed. "All right. We'll need time. And access to the fleet's resonance cores." "You will have both," she said. I hesitated. "There's one more thing." Her gaze sharpened. "Speak." "I think the veil listens," I said carefully. "It responds when you probe it. That's why your scouts went incoherent. They weren't just jammed. They were answered." The Queen went still. The engine node pulsed louder, as if nervous. Then, to my surprise, she didn't dismiss it. She didn't scoff at superstition. She looked at the veil projection like it was a living enemy, and her voice dropped into something almost intimate. "Then we will pass without speaking." My throat went dry. "Your radiance. What exactly do your legends say about doorways?" Her eyes flicked to me. "They say some doors lead to hunger, and some doors lead to—" I asked before I could stop myself. Her flush returned, faint as twilight. "Do not make noise now, human." I held up both hands. "No noise." "Got it." She stared at me for a long heartbeat, then said, "Quieter. You do not fear me." I hesitated. "That's not true." Her brow ridge lifted. "I fear you plenty," I said, "but not in the way your enemies do." Her gaze softened again. For a moment, she looked tired, like someone who had worn a crown so long it had begun to bruise. "Then solve this," she said. "And live." It sounded like permission. It sounded like hope. We rewrote a fleet song. Over the next week, I worked with Carvel engineers, brilliant, cautious creatures who treated my math like a dangerous animal they were slowly learning to pet. We installed counter-harmonic nodes along the flagship's biocables. We tested them in small bursts, watching for stress fractals in the living circuitry. The first time the ship's resonance shifted cleanly, the engine node pulsed like a satisfied heartbeat. Technicians made reverent sounds. One of them looked at me as if I'd performed a miracle. "The star sense accepts your pattern." "Yeah," I said, exhausted. "It's learning a duet." The Queen watched from the observation balcony above the core, silent, her presence a constant weight. Sometimes when I looked up, I caught her studying me, not like a ruler appraising a tool, but like someone trying to understand why a certain star burned the way it did. The day before our planned passage through the veil, she summoned me to a private chamber. Not the throne room, not the war council. A quiet space filled with dark plants that glimmered faintly under soft light. The air smelled of resin and something sweet, like crushed fruit. She stood by a window that looked out over the planet below Carvel's capital, glowing like a living circuit board. When I entered, she didn't turn. "Human Jonah Reeve," she said. "Yes, Your Radiance. Tomorrow we enter the veil. Yes." A pause. Then, in a voice so low I almost thought she hadn't meant to let it out, "If you fail, my people die." The bluntness hit harder than any threat. I swallowed. "I know." She turned then, and her eyes were not ember red tonight. They were darker, deeper, like fire banked under ash. "You have made my ship sing differently," she said. "You have spoken to my star sense without breaking it." "I didn't want to break anything," I said quietly. Her gaze flicked to my face, then away. "You also spoke noise in court." My ears heated. "We're back to that." She stepped closer. The plants around her seemed to lean away, as if making space. "When you spoke," she said, "my court saw weakness." "I'm sorry," I said quickly. She raised one hand. "No," I froze. Her voice tightened, as if she were forcing herself to say something that went against every instinct of monarchy and war. "They saw something in me that is not meant to be seen." I hesitated. "Your blush." Her jaw tightened. "Yes, and is that dangerous?" I asked. Her eyes flicked back to mine. In my species, desire is a weapon. It is used to lure, to dominate, to bind. My throat went dry. And if your court thinks you can be bound, they will try. Her voice turned cold. Or they will try to make others believe I already am. I stared at her, suddenly understanding the weight behind that single word in court, mine. It hadn't just been claim. It had been a shield. She took a slow breath. The air felt too thick. Then she said, almost unwillingly, "Why did you say it, human? I could have chosen safety." Instead, I chose honesty again because her gaze demanded it like gravity demands falling. "Because I didn't expect you to be real," I said. "I expected a symbol, a myth, someone carved out of duty. But you looked at me like a person, and it broke my brain." A beat of silence. Then her flush returned deep, undeniable, rising like a tide beneath midnight skin. She stared at me as if I'd just done something reckless and brave and unforgivably human. "You are dangerous," she whispered. I swallowed. "So I'm told." Her lips parted as if she might say more. Instead, she turned sharply away as though facing me was too close to stepping through a doorway. "You will sleep," she ordered. "I what?" "You will sleep," she repeated, voice regaining its command. "Your mind must be clear." I managed a weak smile. "As you command, Your Radiance." I turned to leave. Her voice stopped me at the door. "Jonah." It was the first time she'd used my name without ceremony. I looked back. She stood with one hand braced on the window frame, her horns silhouetted against the planet light. "If you live through tomorrow," she said, very softly, "do not speak noise in public again." I exhaled. No promises. Her eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker, something like amusement trying to survive in a world built of knives. "Go," she said. I went. And for the first time since arriving, I believed I might actually survive. The Veil waited. We approached it with the entire fleet in formation, engines quiet, comms minimized. The counter-harmonic nodes hummed beneath my feet like restrained thunder. On the bridge, Carvel officers moved with ritual precision. Nobody joked. Nobody spoke louder than necessary. The Queen stood at the center, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. I stood at my console, a human addition bolted into alien architecture. My algorithm ran silently in the background, mapping the net's tension points. The veil filled the viewports like an absence. Stars behind it looked wrong, warped, bent, as if someone had taken the universe and pressed a thumb into it. "Distance?" the Queen asked. 2 minutes, an officer replied. My heartbeat tried to climb out of my chest. The veil pulsed, not visually. It pulsed in a way I felt in my teeth. The star sense flickered once, then stabilized. The fleet's song shifted smooth, controlled, like a choir sliding into a new key. We crossed the threshold. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the veil reacted. The darkness ahead rippled. Lines appeared faint, geometric, like the outline of a web-catching light. My display spiked. "It's aware," I hissed, unable to help myself. The Queen's head turned slightly toward me. "Silence," I shut my mouth. The veil's lattice tightened. A pressure built around the ship, like a hand closing. I watched the resonance readouts. We held. A scout ship at the edge of formation flickered on sensors. Its counter-harmonic nodes stuttered just for a fraction of a second. The veil pounced. The lattice snapped toward it like a predator's tongue. "Compensate," I shouted, breaking protocol. The Queen didn't look at me. "Do it." Technicians flooded the channel with corrective pulses. The scout's resonance shifted back into alignment. The veil missed barely, but in missing, it noticed. Something moved within the dark, a presence, a thought without language. The bridge lights dimmed, the star sense trembled. Then, through the muted comes, a sound leaked like a whisper made of static and hunger. My translator node, traitorous little machine, tried to interpret it. Words crawled across my screen. Speak. My skin went cold. The veil wasn't just a net. It was a mind. And it was trying to make us answer. The Queen's gaze hardened. She stepped forward, placing one hand on the central command rail like she was anchoring herself against the universe. "Do not respond," she said, voice like iron. The whisper came again, stronger. "Speak your true name." Around us, officers stiffened. Carvel legends about doorways suddenly felt very, very relevant. My algorithm pinged a warning. The veils. Pattern was syncing to our counter-harmonics, trying to learn our new song. It wouldn't take long. We needed to pass faster or we'd be singing for a predator. I leaned toward the Queen, voice barely audible. "Your radiance, it's adapting." Her jaw tightened. "Then we outrun it." "We can't. Not without breaking formation." Her eyes flicked to me, sharp as a blade. "Speak, human." Quietly. I swallowed, heart hammering. "If it learns our counter-harmonic, it'll grab us anyway. We need to change the song again. Right now." An officer hissed. "Impossible." I cut him off. "Not impossible. Risky. But possible if we introduce noise." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "Noise." I met her gaze. "The kind it can't predict." Her flush flickered faintly, like memory. "Human," she said, voice low. "You will not embarrass me in front of the void." "Not like that," I said quickly. "I mean randomization. Human unpredictability. We can modulate the counter-harmonic with." The whisper surged, furious. "Speak, speak." The veil tightened. The ship groaned. I felt the star sense strain like a living thing trying not to scream. The Queen stared into the darkness. Then she said, with the calm of someone who had ruled through war and betrayal and still had enough self left to choose differently, "Let him speak." Every head snapped toward her. I stared. "Your radiance, not to it," she corrected, eyes locked on mine. "To me." My brain stalled again. Not because I didn't understand, because I did. She was offering the veil something else to latch onto, a different signal, a different pattern. Something human, something emotional. Something that would confuse a predator built to hunt predictable resonance. She was using me as bait, and she was making the choice herself. The ship shuddered. The whisper screamed in my translator. Name. Truth. The Queen stepped closer until her presence filled my entire world. "Speak," she said softly. "Your noise." My mouth was dry. My hand shook. I should have said math. I should have said code. I should have said anything safe. Instead, because humans are the universe's favorite mistake and because the Queen's eyes were steady in a way that felt like trust, I looked at her and said, loudly enough for her translator node to catch, softly enough to still be for her alone, "Your radiance. You're beautiful." The bridge went silent. The Queen froze. Color flared across her cheeks, her throat ridges, the base of her horns deep violet blooming like wildfire. The veil hesitated. On my display, its lattice pattern spiked with confusion. The predator. Mine tried to interpret the signal, to categorize it, to fold it into its hunting net, and failed. Because affection didn't fit its equations. Because sincerity wasn't a frequency it understood. The whisper stuttered, "Speak." Then weaker. Why? The fleet's resonance shifted as I injected the modulation pattern tiny variations. Randomized pulses, the kind of messy, alive noise humans called improvisation. The star sense steadied, following the new duet. The veil's lattice grasped at empty air. We surged forward. Stars snapped back into shape beyond the darkness, and suddenly we were through. The veil fell behind us like a door slamming shut. The bridge lights returned. Silence held for 3 long seconds, as if the ship itself couldn't believe it. Then alarms died, readouts normalized, and a low ripple of stunned murmurs passed through the crew. The Queen stood utterly still, cheeks still flushed, eyes wide in a way that made her look for one impossible moment less like a monarch and more like a person, caught in an emotion she hadn't armored against. She turned slowly toward me. Her voice, when it came, was quiet enough that only I heard it. "You used that," I swallowed. "Yes." Her eyes narrowed. "As a weapon," I hesitated. "As a truth?" For a moment, I thought she might strike me. Instead, her gaze dropped just for a heartbeat to my mouth. Then she looked away sharply, regaining her composure like snapping a blade back into its sheath. "To the War Council," she ordered, voice cold again. "We have passed." The crew moved. Orders flowed. The bridge returned to function. But as I stepped back from my console, knees weak, I felt something brush my wrist light, almost accidental, her clawed fingertips. A touch so brief it could have been dismissed as nothing. Except her translator node hummed once, very softly, as if it had caught a word she hadn't meant to let escape. Jonah. After the victory, they called me a resonance tamer, which sounded like a job title you got on a cereal box. The council wanted to award me medals. The military wanted my algorithms. The priests wanted to know if I had spoken to the veil's mouth and survived with my soul intact. I avoided all of them. The Queen summoned me that night. Not to the audience hall. Not to the bridge. To the same quiet chamber of glimmering plants and planet light. When I arrived, she was alone again. No crown crystal this time. No guards. Just her, standing by the window as if she didn't know where else to put the weight of herself. She didn't turn when she spoke. "You saved my fleet." "I did my job," I said. A pause. Then, quieter. "You spoke noise again." I exhaled. "Yeah." She turned slowly. Her flush was already there, faint as dusk. "I ordered you not to," she said, but there was no anger in it. Only something strained, something almost uncertain. "You ordered me not to do it in public," I reminded her. Her eyes narrowed. "Clever. Human," I said carefully. "I didn't mean to expose you." She stepped closer, and the room felt smaller. "You did," she said simply, and the void heard it. "I'm sorry." Her gaze sharpened. "Do you regret it?" My heart thudded. I thought of the veil whispering for names. I thought of her flushing in court, the way her court had stiffened, the way she'd claimed me as shield and strategy. I thought of the fingertip touch on my wrist. "No," I admitted. "I don't." Her throat ridges fluttered once, a betraying sign of emotion. "In my empire," she said, voice low, "if a queen is seen to desire, enemies use it." I figured. "And yet," she continued, eyes burning into mine, "you made me visible." I swallowed. Maybe being visible isn't always weakness. Her lips parted slightly. The flush deepened. "You are dangerous," she whispered again. "And you're terrifying," I said, because honesty had gotten me this far and I was apparently committed to the bit. A sound escaped her, small, startled. A laugh, real this time. It made something in my chest loosen in a way I hadn't noticed was tight. She stepped closer until we were a breath apart. Her gaze held mine steady, unflinching, royal and vulnerable all at once. "Speak," she said softly. I hesitated. "You sure?" Her eyes flicked to my mouth again. "Yes," so I did. Not a compliment meant to disarm a predator. Not a noise used to confuse the void. Just words, plain and human and true. "I'm attracted to you," I said quietly. And it scares me, because you're a queen and I'm me. But it's real. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she lifted one hand slowly, as if giving me the chance to retreat, and touched the side of my face with the lightest edge of her fingertips. Her skin was warm. Her voice trembled just enough to make my breath catch. In my language, she said, there is a phrase used only when a soul chooses a bond that can break empires. I swallowed. That sounds intense. Her lips curved, faint but unmistakable. It is. She leaned in, close enough that I could feel her breath, close enough that the universe seemed to hold its own. And she whispered the phrase in Carvel, soft, resonant, vibrating through the air like a song. Her translator node didn't translate it. It only hummed as if it didn't dare. She pulled back slightly, eyes searching mine. You will stay, she said. It wasn't command. It was question disguised as one. I laughed, shaky. Your radiance. I came here thinking I'd fix a ship and maybe not die. Her gaze sharpened. And now? Now, I said, I'm thinking the galaxy is full of doorways. And maybe some of them lead to something worth stepping through. Her flush deepened into something radiant. The Queen of Carvel, warrior, ruler, shield of 1,000 worlds, let her forehead rest gently against mine. A gesture so small, so intimate, it felt like a secret. Then speak, she murmured. Not noise. Truth, I whispered back. Her smile barely there, but real answered me. And outside the window, the stars burned steady and bright, as if the universe itself had decided to listen. And, for once, not devour what it heard.